either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And we are continuing our spooky season. Yes. I am, at this point, guts deep in horror films, and I am loving it. And as we know, I tend to go to extremes with my movie choices.
Yes.
And this year, I decided to choose a film that is near and dear to me. Mm-hmm. This was my first real introduction to Japanese body horror.
Okay.
We are doing Tokyo Gore Police.
Which is exactly what you think it is.
Yes.
Yes.
And,
Which is honestly part of the reason why this movie's arguably good.
Yes.
Like, because it's not trying to be anything other than exactly what it is. It's a gore fest. It's about police, kind of. And it's in Tokyo.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun, and I think
it is a good, I think, introductory. Like, if you like gore films, this is a good introductory to the like Japanese style body horror.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking about it earlier or last week, that we actually had originally both seen this movie when it was still streaming on Netflix.
Yes,
back in the good old days when Netflix
didn't quite monitor how much stuff was on there.
Exactly, and I miss that. I really do.
Back when Netflix was a little bit more carefree and fancy, stuff like this ended up on there. Not so much anymore. Now this more Amazon-esque, I think. But
back when you had to stream it on the Wii, you had to put in a DVD.
Yes, I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah, but so to help break down more what this movie concept is, especially if you're not familiar with, if you're not into horror as far as we are, there's a lot of subgenres, and we've talked about that last year.
Yeah.
And gore is a subgenre in the horror industry. This one is inside a subgenre of that subgenre, though.
Well, okay, so it's a little bit more complicated than that. To give a basic premise of Tokyo Gore Police, or background, Tokyo Gore Police is a Japanese action splatter and body horror film that was co-written and directed by Yoshihiro Nishimura, and it's starring I don't know how to say her first name that well, Shina, and it was, a lot of people know her as Asami in Takashi Miike's Audition. And the movie is set in a future Japan where the police have been privatized and they are waging war against biologically altered beings known as engineers.
Yes.
Now, the reason I wanted to get into a little bit of the definition is because every time I talk to someone who's not familiar with these genres and I say, oh, it's a body horror film, they're like, well, what exactly is that?
Sure.
And
it's not a genre that's super well known in the US.
And it's, in some regard, in the horror genre, in the horror field it is, but like, it's a weird in-between genre that has a lot of similarities to other genres, similar to like how exploitation films have similar features to other films, and it's kind of up to the personal definition of it sometimes.
Yeah, that's fair.
But a little bit, a splatter horror film, and I believe we actually talked about it a little bit when we did Night of the Living Dead, because George Romero actually coined it for Dawn of the Dead. And through recent years, the genre has become more and more extreme and has been labeled torture porn.
Yeah.
Mostly it's actually been popularized by Hollywood in the past couple decades with like Eli Roth's Hostel or the Saw franchise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which also, Hostel pulled inspiration from Takashi Miike's Ichi the Killer.
Of course.
Yeah. And so with that, body horror itself is loosely defined as a genre where the main feature is graphic depiction of destruction or degradation of the human body, either through means of sex, mutation, disease, or violent acts.
Yeah. So for this movie, I would say most of the example to that would be some type of mutilation or violent act, causing thus the change in mutation.
Yes.
At least for this movie.
And which is why, like, it overlaps with or splatter and slasher films.
Yes.
Some of the tropes of body horror include invasion, contagion, mutation, transformation, disease, mutilation, and just unnatural, violent distortions of the human body.
And also unhumanistic amounts of blood.
Yes. Oh man, there's
so much.
In Japanese body horror, there's a lot of crazy amounts of gore. And I think we've seen more of it, like with Hobo with a Shotgun. Yeah.
There's a kind of American subgenre of horror gore that's kind of, it's not a true subgenre because I don't think anyone would actively say their movie is that. But in the American subgenre of horror, there's like gore and then there's like copious amounts of blood gore. Yeah. And those are usually the ones where if you're into those sort of movies like we are, you'd say like, oh, that's a really cheesy one because it's just like water faucet amount of blood. And that's kind of something that gets leaned into. Tokyo Gore Police and I would say Japanese body horror and gore in general tend to lean a little bit more heavy onto the extreme amounts of nonsense blood. Yes, /
they also stem from different origins, I would say. Because, while the term body horror originally was coined by Philip Brophy in 1983 in his article, Horality, the Textualization of the Contemporary Horror Film. And even though, like, he wasn't specifically coining a new genre, he was more defining a trope or a series of trends he'd seen. Yeah. But even then, like, American or Western body horror we early recognized in the 80s from the works of David Cronenberg. Sure. Most people will know him from the remake of The Fly, but he also did early works like Shivers and Rabid, which both solid movies. But even then, our body horror is more defined from Gothic literature. Yeah. And we see that in the works of Mary Shelley, as well as H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe.
Those are very much like the classical inspirations.
Yeah. I've been actually reflecting on this a little bit and why I love this style of movie. My first introduction to body horror was the Alien franchise.
I think a lot of people it is, but it's one of those movies where, like, it's so broadly seen as a horror movie that, like, it's definitely got all of the elements needed. Yeah. But it's one of those things where, especially with subgenres, it's very easy to be put under your umbrella term if a lot of people like it. And then the subgenre gets either put to the side or that's the only one of that example most people could think of.
Yes. And even then we have earlier films such as The Blob and The Fly. Oh, definitely. Which the original Fly is solid. The effects haven't aged super well, but...
No, but it is a fun film to watch.
Yeah, they're quite fun. And as for Japanese body horror, though, it takes things, I would say, to more extremes. Yes. Where it's more surreal process rather than... based on fears of because that's the thing with a lot of Cronenberg's films is they're based off generic human fears, whereas like Tokyo Gore Police or Japanese body horror in general are just like, well, she has katanas coming out of her tits, why not?
And I think that is one of the main differences with Western and Japanese horror in general, not just with body horror, but the overarching concept is usually the thing that I think defines the two, because the overarching concepts we have in both. Yeah. But American horror, even if it is body horror, generally tends to have some backbone that we can see throughout general horror as well. It's something that the general American audience or Western audience in general would find scary. So serial killers, the dark, bugs, that sort of thing. Yeah. Something like, of course you would check that off your list of things that are scary. Whereas I think a lot of Japanese films in general, it's more of a concept or a visual styling. And then the fear part is not necessarily the first thing that is like holding the story together. It's sometimes even like not even part of the story whatsoever.
Exactly.
Which is kind of nice though, because it does mean that there's two different like worlds of this genre to explore. There's the ones that have much more backbone of story and thought. a good example are the classics, where they're kind of thought-provoking and they make you, like, question your place in the universe sometimes, or your own morality, or, you know, your sense of importance and ideas. Whereas with a lot of the Japanese ones, you might eventually get to that concept and thought process, but you spend more time appreciating the art of the horror movie.
Yeah, and for American or for Japanese films, I've kind of noticed that body horror doesn't necessarily always mean it's going to be a horror film. For example, one of the earliest examples of Japanese body horror, or movie that had body horror elements, was 1988's Akira, which we covered last Christmas.
Which, I think Akira is a good example of the Japanese film industry in general, especially their less mainstream film industries, are very they're very good at taking elements from a lot of different places and bringing them together to create something that visually means something to them. Yeah. Whereas American film, we have a much more strong tendency to stick in a lane. So if it's a dark, broody horror movie, the color palette, you know what you're going to get. The characters, you're going to get a pretty good template. It's rare that we get something that's completely out of the box, and that's usually when people perk up. Whereas with Japanese films, in general, you don't always necessarily know exactly what you're going to get. Yeah. Which is part of the fun, though. That's kind of the reason why we like this genre, specifically the Japanese one, because you're not always guaranteed you're going to get the movie you thought you were.
Exactly. You and me enjoy it. Your husband, on the other hand, is having a very hard time with some of these movies that I've been introducing him to.
Some of them definitely. I think, though, Tokyo Gore Police is a really good entry level, because they're, like with all horror movies, there's a huge range. And Tokyo Gore Police is a nice entry level to, the crazy stunts that Japanese horror and story writing brings to the table, because there is a story, there is a plot, and there is character development and backstory development. We just don't care. Yeah. Because we're very visually busy for this movie. But it does have all those elements, which means that, especially from a Western audience, like, Brian watched this one with us, and I don't think he hated it. He had questions. Yes. Because he is a very linear thought person. And this movie's storytelling is not linear. It is in a way, but there's a lot of, like, surprise, I'm that person's son, and thus this is why I'm important. And you're like, oh, of course. Yeah. Why didn't I see it coming? Yeah. So that was more of where his questions were. So if you go in knowing, like, okay, this is going to be nonsense, the special effects aren't going to make sense, they're just going to look cool. Exactly. Then it is a good time. And I think it's a good entry to understanding that sort of movie.
Yeah, and I honestly feel that there's been more of an opening up to this style of film, especially in the West. Some other examples that I've ranted about to a lot of people are Gozu, Tetsuo the Iron Man, which is arguably one of the earliest film body horrors. Yeah. Parasite the Maxim, which has been quite popular lately. Yeah. Meatball Machine, which
is another good one.
I'll get Brian to watch that at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, as I mentioned previously, Takashi Miike's Ichi the Killer in Audition, as well as in manga, the works of Jinjo Ito.
Yeah, and I think especially in the West,
Junji Ito.
Yeah, I think in the West, his name is starting to become pretty common, especially among the horror readers.
Yeah, like you can find shirts with his artwork on it at Hot Topic and stuff now.
So I do think that this visual style is definitely, it's almost reached the point of like, oh, this isn't a new concept. I'm looking forward to the point where also the storytelling nonsense part also becomes pretty like normalized, because I think for a lot of people that's the part that's hard to get over. Yeah. Because like our friend Crystal is also into really nonsense, bloody horror with us. Like, we watched all of the old splashers together. Like, she was the one who got me into 80s Scream Queen, which arguably has a lot of blood for no reason in it. Yeah. And so, like, she likes this sort of movie, but a lot of the time, it did take a while for us to stop wondering why this person is now an alligator. And just accept that is what happened. And, like, not let that hook you on like hook you up as part of the movie watching experience.
Yeah, and I think I got over that pretty quickly because I've always admired surrealist artwork from like when I was in high school and stuff. So
yeah, it's very surrealist.
Yeah, it was very. I was easily able to like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, like if you're willing to like not let those speed bumps get to you, it's a good time.
Yeah,
but I think Tokyo Gore Police is also a good entry point because yeah, there are those speed bumps, there are those visual like questions. There's only a couple of scenes that are like, because Japanese horror in general, but a lot of body horror tends to lean more heavy on the sex part than I think a lot of American audiences are comfortable with.
Yes.
And I think Tokyo Gore Police does a good job of balancing where it's definitely there, it's definitely part of it, and it introduces you to like, hey, this is a theme that Japanese horror and Japanese body horror uses quite frequently.
Yeah. But
we're not going to linger on it so long that you no longer want to watch the movie. It's a good entry for you to be like, oh, this is part of these tropes and this is why it's here. And thus we're going to move on from that.
Yeah, it's not like, in terms of exploitation films, there are penises and dildos, but it's not to the extreme of like, I was a female ninja.
Exactly.
We have both seen that one, and it is gold.
It is gold, but it is also a lot.
Yes.
And I think the a lot part, especially for a Western audience, we're very, whether or not you'd like to admit it, we're a very conservative culture as far as the bedroom side goes, especially in films and movies. It's pretty rare to see, especially in horror. Like, it's usually something that's hinted at. It might be played a little bit, but it's always in a dark, dim room, and then we immediately get to the killing.
Yeah.
Whereas...
Or anything involving the genitals generally deters people. Like Teeth. Yes. Teeth is actually a fun movie.
But it is also, like, you have to get over the down there part.
Yeah, she's got teeth in her vagina.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the main hurdles for a lot of these films. Mm-hmm. And I think Tokyo Gore Police is a good entry point where it's something that you can judge for yourself how far you're willing to watch. Because there are films out there without it in it, or a very brief scene like this one.
Yeah.
Where it's easy for you to be like, all right, gonna quickly check my phone, and the scene's over, and I can go back. Just like when you watch films with your mom. And that one kissing scene would come on, and you'd be like, not now. Not now.
Why I was not allowed to watch Titanic. But before we actually get into the movie, now that we've explained a little bit of the background of what body horror is.
Yeah.
What are we drinking today, Chris?
We're drinking delicious, nutritious orange juice.
Yes.
Yes.
Should have bought sake and made a sake sunrise. That would have been fitting.
That would have been fitting.
Yeah. So, anywho, back to Tokyo Gore Police. I did a little bit more digging than I normally do for these movies because I love this genre, but I also like finding all these like little weird connections between movies and stuff, which, by the way, Mom, this is how I find these kind of movies is I watch one movie and then I'm like, oh, this director did this actress wasn't this, X, Y, and Z, and it's just a rabbit hole. So, Tokyo Gore Police, I actually found out was a remake of one of Nishimura's earlier films called, Anatomia Extinction. Mm-hmm. That movie is definitely more political based and has a bigger message behind it than Tokyo Gore Police does.
Sure.
It's more focused on overpopulation and overworking.
Okay. Which, I mean, you can kind of see some of the overarching themes in Tokyo Gore Police, but it's definitely not a focus.
Yeah, the privatization of the police, the engineers, all that stuff is in that movie, but it's on a 40-some minute frame.
Yeah.
Fun fact, currently it is still on YouTube, so...
Oh, you can watch it for free.
Yep, that's how I watched it. But Nishimura actually decided to remake it after being approached by the Entertainment Corporation Media Blasters while working on special effects for Meatball Machine.
Which, if you get around to Meatball Machine, the visual stylings do make sense on where you can see the connection.
Oh, yeah. Also, the fight choreographer from Meatball Machine, Tak Sakaguchi, also joined the production. I know him more as an actor than anything. People who are familiar with Japanese movies in general, he is in Godzilla Final Wars.
Yes.
Mutant Girl Squad.
A fun one.
Deadball, and Yakuza Weapon.
Yakuza Weapon's another fun one.
You've seen him in a lot of stuff.
You have, yeah.
The most impressive thing for me about this movie is that, or about Tokyo Gore Police, is that it was completed in 2 weeks.
Yeah, filmed and completed in 2 weeks.
All special effects, everything.
And normally when we say that, it's like a warning, this movie, like, had 2 weeks. No, this movie looks great.
Yeah.
This movie looks fine. We don't have any clipping. There's not obviously visually wrong parts. Yeah, there's some parts where, like, maybe an animation could have been cleaned up a little bit, or CGI could have been a little bit tighter, but it's not, like, it's a gore fest, it's an action film, it's a horror movie. Things are always on the move. You don't really notice. Exactly. You don't have time to nitpick the details of the weird arm.
Yes. As well, this would be Nishimura's first commercial film.
Yes. Which, not a bad first start.
Yes. I think part of what lends to it is that he had an overarching idea to begin with.
That helps a lot.
In remaking something that he had done previously, but...
Especially since, like, his original one had a much bigger scope. It's easier to take a bigger scope and will it down into something that's a little bit more just a visual fun horror movie than it is to take a visually fun horror movie and try and pack it full of meaning. So he definitely took a good route to get his first movie out there.
Yep. As well, splattered throughout the movie, there is a series of commercials.
Yes.
They are placed there to brighten the tone.
Yeah, they were suggested to be added to help.
Yes.
And I mean, they do, but in like a weird, like, sort of way.
Yeah.
Especially, I think for a Western audience, which is part of the reason why the Western watchers who aren't deep in or into Tokyo culture and like Tokyo horror culture, I think that's kind of, they definitely brighten the mood because they're bright colors, they're very commercially, they're very fun and poppy. But all of them are promoting like cutter culture, so like cutting your wrists, that sort of stuff, and trying to make it sound like in this world that's a fun, normal activity.
Yeah, I think.
Whereas in the U.S., like we've spent so long trying to handle that with our own youth, and like we've never done a good job of it. Whereas in Tokyo, they've always, and in Japan in general, they've taken a very different approach to handling that same problem that they've had.
Okay.
And so I think for a Western audience, it definitely does brighten the mood, but it brightens the mood in kind of like a, that was weird. Kind of like how when we watch Japanese commercials that are like purposefully weird, it's kind of like, that was strange.
It makes me think of Starship Troopers.
Yeah. Whereas I think a Japanese audience would see it more as like a comedy play on the current situation and that topic, where they'd see it more as a satire. I think a Western audience, it definitely does what it's supposed to. It just does it in a different way. But they still work. Yeah.
And so actually all these commercials were filmed and directed by two other directors, Nobuo Iguchi and Yudai Yamaguchi. Yamaguchi is the director for Meatball Machine, Yakuza Weapon, and Deadball.
All good.
Iguchi is also a director, and his works include Machine Girl, Mutant Girl Squad, and I learned he did the reboot of Junji Ito's Tomy franchise with Tomy Unlimited, which I learned is the 8th movie in that franchise.
I did not know that.
I did not either. And that's the only one we can get over here in the West, so... Also, as well, just a little side note, Nishimura, Iguchi, and Yamaguchi all have segments in the horror anthology ABCs of Death, and they're the only Japanese directors in it.
Yeah, and ABCs of Death, another good one. Definitely on my watch.
I wanted to get back to... I wanted to try and watch it, but I didn't have time to.
Unfortunately.
We've been busy with work.
Very busy.
Yeah, so... Alright. So, into the movie.
Yes.
Oh boy. I have been excited for this movie since last Halloween.
Yes.
The start of the movie is stupidly gold.
It is.
It starts off with a girl bragging about how much she loves her father, who's a cop.
It's very cheesily shot as well. Like, it's clearly meant to, like, you know how, like, in some movies they're like, look at the dog, don't you love the dog? Now the dog is dead.
Yes, if there
it's definitely playing off of that vibe.
Yeah.
Where they're trying to be like, I love my dad, he's the best thing in the world, I hope nothing happens to him.
Head immediately explodes.
Immediately dead.
And now that's how we begin this movie.
Yes.
And then we're quickly cut to police surrounding a building, and there's some criminal barbecuing Long Pig, which, side note, Long Pig is human flesh.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the horror slang for it.
Yes. Or, I mean, just slang in general.
Yeah. But... And this is kind of I like how the movie sets up, like, we get our intro to our main character at the very beginning and her sad backstory. Nice and brief. Don't care. Dad's now dead. She's sad.
Yep. She's a cutter.
She's part of the cutter. I guess in this world, it's like really a culture. Mm-hmm. Like, kind of like how there's some kids who are really into going to the club and they're in the club culture. She's in the cutter culture. That's just how this movie presents it.
Yeah.
But I also like that right off the bat, we are introduced to the police. Which,
I love that your husband's like, awesome costuming. Like, police uniforms are
the police
dope.
uniforms. And I think that's part of the reason why this specific Japanese horror and body horror movie feels kind of Halloween-esque to me. Is because, like, it's such a cop costume that it's like on the verge of that cheesy cop costume that you would see for Halloween in like the dollar area where you're like, that one, and you put it on, it looks nothing like that.
Yeah.
It feels like an advertisement for that cop costume.
They feel ill-fitting.
They do feel ill-fitting.
They feel a little bit too big, but I also like it because they're imposing.
They are very imposing.
Yes.
And so we're introduced to them right away, and we're also introduced to what's meant to be the threat of the movie right away, which is, this world's fucked up. Yeah,
we also, there's cuts between that and Peppy Dispatcher.
Yes.
Who's kind of a go-go dancer. I don't know, something like...
Yeah, let's go with go-go dancer.
Yeah, that's the thing I can think of.
Doing her own thing.
Yeah, she kind of is carrying on of, like, explaining what's happening, that, hey, there's a criminal up there, go execute him.
Yep.
And then when the police do get up there, they blast him away with their machine guns.
They do. They destroy this person.
And before that, he gets up there and he starts doing the whole Bubba from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes, he does.
With his green teeth and a really bad wig.
It is a pretty bad wig. It's fantastically bad.
So yeah, they blow him away.
Yep.
And
completely mow him over.
We're introduced to what an actual engineer is. His arm becomes fused to his chainsaw. And he can throw it.
Yes.
On a chain.
Yes. I don't know if you've seen this movie. This part kind of sort of reminds me of the Quest for Camelot movie. There's a part in that movie which they are very different movies, but they kind of have a similar vibe because in the bad guy of that movie, he takes people and pours liquid down a well, and he takes a person and a weapon and tosses them down there, and they come back out and fuse together. And one of the things he does is he takes a chicken and an axe and he throws them together, and the chicken axe comes out, and that's a character for the rest of the movie. Have you seen this movie?
I have seen it, but it's been a really, really long time.
This is like the children version of that movie.
Okay.
It's got body horror in it, but for children.
I guess. And so, Ruka is, which, by the way, that's the main character's name,
if you don't remember her name, don't worry. Like, it's a very visual movie. You don't need to, be invested in the dialogue.
You'll know who it is. All their costumes are iconic, where it's like...
Yeah, they are very, individually looking and acting, and they did a good job, actually, with all the character designs in general.
Yeah.
Everyone, even the background and, throwaway dead characters, all have very, unique styles to them. Which is kind of nice.
Oh, yeah. No, I honestly, knowing that the movie was made in 2 weeks makes this movie
really impressive,
much more impressive. So, yes, Ruka is dispatched specifically to take out engineers.
Yes, that's her one job.
How does she get to the roof?
She rocket launches herself onto the roof.
Halo-style bazooka jump onto the roof.
So we got to that part, and my husband went, "The fuck is this movie?" Because that is a very good vibe to have. Ignore your understanding of any sort of reality. We can now bazooka jump. Don't worry about it.
Yes. Oh yeah. And so she gets up there, she starts fighting the engineer, and her sword gets knocked out of her hand.
Yes.
And she ends up, not before, she cut off his chainsaw arm.
Yeah.
And begins slicing and dicing him with his own arm.
Yes, it's very stupid and unnecessarily amounts of blood are going everywhere. But it's fun. It's a fun,
chainsaw fight.
It's a fun chainsaw fight.
Hell yeah. And then on top of that, she has to take her sword and cut off his head or something.
So you have to destroy the key part.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute.
So she chops off his head and is like, all right, job complete.
Yep.
Mission accomplished.
And we immediately from here cut right into our first propaganda film or propaganda commercial explaining the privatization of the police force as they execute a criminal.
And all of these clips, especially the police force ones, are meant very much to be like, look how nice and happy the police are. Like, very, like, stereotypical, like, kissing babies style, like, propaganda. But they're always shot with a bunch of unnecessary, like, gore or horror that you would never normally put in a propaganda. And they're put side by side while everyone's still white teeth smiling.
Yes.
And that's kind of part of, like, how they're lightening up the mood. Because the whole movie kind of does this.
Yeah.
But this part is so in your face that you can't help but giggle at how stupid it is.
It's super jarring the first time you see it. And then
you kind of get used to it.
Yeah, because it starts, instead of just like being randomly placed, they're used as a way to cut between scenes.
And like locations and stuff.
Yeah.
And honestly, like the first one, is a little jarring, and especially if you don't have someone who's already seen the film to be like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be like a commercial. Yeah. Then it takes like, I think to like the second one or the third one for you to be like, oh, okay, this isn't part of the story. Yeah. It's just part of, it's background world building. Yeah. And so like once you know that, it's super entertaining. You kind of like want just all of them to play, kind of like really bad Super Bowl commercials. Yeah. Like they're hilarious because of how over the top they are. Yeah, that is actually a good comparison. They're very Super Bowl commercially where you're like, this is terrible, I want another. Yes. And so after the first commercial, we are introduced to the Igor-like medical examiner. That's the other thing. Like, he's very Igor-y. The only person that I know has a direct name in this movie is Ruka. Yeah, everyone else is like dog girl, alligator girl. And, like, that's from the credits. Yeah. And then some of them, like, we were like, hey, that person looks familiar. Are they anything? They're not credited at all. Yeah. They're just, like, it's not even like, oh, this character description played. No, just not mentioned ever again. Yeah. And you're like, but who are they? Yeah. So, just as a warning, everyone's going to be described, and that's just how they're going to be referred to for the rest of forever. Because they don't have names. Yep. And so, Igor is, walking down the, Japanese Igor. Japanese Igor. And he is, like, that is a very accurate description of him. He's very Japanese Igor meets mad, what's the word for a body cutter-upper person? Morgue mortician. A mortician. Okay. Yeah. Morgue worker or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, he's doing his weird little shuffle. He's shuffling down the hall, talking to, and while he's going on, he is kind of explaining to you what an engineer is. Yes. What the world is like, and it's all the stuff we've already told you. Yeah, he explains that the engineers are criminals with modified bodies who, when injured, they turn their body part into a weapon. Yes. And this is where we're introduced to their weakness, where there's always a key-shaped tumor in them, and they can only be killed once this tumor is severed. Yes. For some whatever reason. For funs and giggles. And the only part that's also, like, especially for a Western audience, is a little bit, like, it takes you a second, is the first version of an engineer that we meet, it's implied that they, like, fuse a weapon that's nearby, and then can modify themselves, adapting thusly. That's not the case. Throw that thought out the window. It's kind of random. You don't know what you're going to get until you get it, sort of logic. Yeah, kind of like Project Power with the pills. Yeah, very similar, only not quite as cool. Yeah. But also better because you're not going to explode. Debatable. I think these are fun. I mean, they are. Some of them would be very impractical to live with, though. Oh, yeah. And so, we're also introduced that Ruka is part of the police force, but she's a special division known as the Engineer Hunters. Yes. And despite it being a generic name, it's fitting and it's better than something like the Hot Dog Squad. This is true. And honestly, like, the Engineer Hunters part would make a really great anime because they've got all the tropes there. They've got her, the broody, backstoried main character. We've got Igor, the scientist, who we could argue helps make things. we're not giving a yes he is, but like maybe he might help.
He's a Frankenstein kind of dude.
He's a Frankenstein kind of dude. We get our gal who's constantly bubbly and telling everyone like the scene. And then we're also introduced to our father figure sort of man.
Not yet.
Oh yeah, not quite.
We're that's a little bit ahead. Very little ahead. Because it goes from this to Ruka patrolling, and she stops by, or patrolling Tokyo. Mm-hmm. We see that there's a lot of propaganda, kind of like from They Live, where it's like, privatized police force, you will be happier, that kind of stuff.
It's almost like on the verge of like, the American idea of Big Brother sort of propaganda, where it's over the top, it's really nonsense, but instead of being like doom and gloom, it's all like bubblegum and sunshine. Don't you want the police force to be your best friend?
Besties! And so we do meet Ruka's kind of mother-like figure.
I would say like older sister.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
She stops at at Bar Independent, for a nice, refreshing glass of orange juice. And it's supposed to be one of those small bars. Tokyo in particular, I know, has a lot of them. We don't really have anything quite like that here in America, but they're really small bars. They only seat like a couple of people, like 10 at the most. There's that one in Rogers that I haven't been to yet. The one that's kind of off the alley.
Yeah, like we have some bars that are small, but it's not like It's
not a few butts in a seat, kind of.
Like, when we say a few butts in a seat, we mean, like, a few butts in a seat sort of bar. But they're always usually overly decorated. You go there because you like the owner or the bartender. And you kind of go, like, you have your bar. And there's a bunch of them. There'd be a bunch of them all in the same area or even, like, in a row down the street. And so you could even, like, hop down. Like, each one would probably sell, like, one type of food. This one sells orange juice. Yeah,
it kind of makes me think of the Anime Cafe.
Yeah, it does kind of. Yeah. Similar, like, small vibe. You go for a little bit, and then you move on to the next thing. Or if you were, like, a real regular patron like she is, you go, you talk with the owner. You kind of think of them as a good friend.
Yeah. And so,
and we kind of get a little bit of, like, understanding of who her friend is. Her friend is also in the cutter culture, also sad backstory that we're hinted at a little bit, because everyone in this movie has one, let's be real.
Yeah.
You can't be happy in this world. It's not allowed.
Yeah, and honestly, now that we've been talking about it a little bit, the commercials actually really help a lot.
Yeah, they do.
And so Ruka is, while she's in the bar, we also learn that people are weary of the police because two patrons walk in.
Yes.
And they see that she's an engineer hunter. And that's the thing. I don't know if it's specifically the police, but it's definitely the engineer hunters that they're a little bit weary of.
And honestly, like, that's kind of a fair statement because the police are dressed policey. The engineer hunters are dressed like death samurais coming to kill.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, not even like SWAT team versus police, but like SWAT team plus like unnecessary amounts of armor and weapons. And you're like, are you guys okay?
Yeah.
Y'all need to have a psych check.
Exactly. And so Ruka is immediately called back to the station on a pager, I think.
Yeah, some nonsense.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And she shows up at the police station. It looks abandoned. There's red lights flashing. And
it could be a trap.
As she's walking, or as she enters an empty floor, man walks out in a dope horned armor.
It very much is like paintings of an old samurai costume that someone took inspiration from and then like Mad Maxified it.
Yes. And this man is accompanied by, the character's name is Dog Girl, but I've always called it Katana Gimp.
Which is also fair.
Very fitting.
Yeah.
But her character name is Dog Girl. Side note also about this character, or about this actress. She also plays in Mutant Girl Squad as actual character name Mutant Girl Breast Swords.
Good.
Katana titties.
Good character naming.
Yes.
But yeah, she's definitely there for like the visual like shock factor.
Yeah.
Because the other characters, are over the top, but like not too much. It's kind of like how there's certain scenes from Mad Max where you go, that character is disgusting and I want nothing to do with them. She's that character.
Side note, for people who haven't seen it, which I don't know why you're listening if you haven't seen it, she's a paraplegic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is left in...
She's quadriplegic. That's
yes.
the term.
And left in, the weird, squeaky, sexy leather.
Yes.
And walks around like a dog on a leash. And for the first part of the movie, you're like, this character makes me uncomfortable. She is explained a little bit better later on why she is at all kept in the police station. It's one of those parts where you just gotta kind of let it happen.
It's the future of police dogs.
I hope not.
I hope not either. That would be terrifying.
Because honestly, like, I think it was our friend Crystal when she was watching this. Even once we got to the part where it's explained and why this character isn't completely useless as a character, even she was like, no, this is still a useless, like, idea.
Yes.
It's fun as far as, like, when we explain later on in the story, like, why she's part of the police force. Like, character-wise, this is silly.
Yes.
But yeah, no, bad, like, you picked the wrong build for your police dog.
Yes.
This is not effective.
Yeah, and so, we're introduced to, surprise, the creepy man is actually Ruka's adoptive father / chief of police.
It's very much anime style where it's like, we're all in this together. We're a family. Think of me as your dad, but I am your boss.
Yes.
And we all have bad back issues where our emotional backstory is so terrible that it drives us to do what we do.
Yes.
It's very much like 90s anime style.
Oh, yeah. And they're there to celebrate Ruka's birthday / her 50th engineer that she's killed.
Hooray! And they give her the most, like, basic Japanese cake I've ever seen. It's a beautiful little white cake with little tiny candied strawberries around the top. It's adorable.
Yes.
It's like almost like Christmas, like those commercials of Christmas cakes that we see here, where it's like, I have no idea if real Japanese people buy this, but like that's the only commercial we see of Japanese Christmas is the white cake with strawberries.
Yeah.
That's what cake they got her. So in my mind, it's Christmas cake.
Yeah. I have a couple people I could probably ask.
You should ask them if they get white cake with strawberries for Christmas, because that's all of the commercials I see is they get KFC and white cake with strawberries for Christmas.
Yeah, Shusei's still in Japan, so... Yeah, I might reach out to him. I'm curious.
Research for me, because if so, then she got Christmas cake for her birthday.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him in a while, so it might be weird, but we'll see. And so at this point, as she's looking over her cake, we're also actually introduced to her full backstory.
Yes.
Of her, her mom had issues.
Her
dad was an overworking police officer.
And it's one of those backstories where, like, her mom clearly needed, like, actual help. Like, she needed to go to a facility and have a doctor and have someone home with her 24/7 who could help her and monitor her.
Yeah.
But she was married to an overworking policeman who, that wasn't part of this world's culture, was to get anyone help.
Gets his head blown off.
He just dies. So
and we don't actually ever find out what happens to the mom either.
We don't. We just kind of assume that, like, she couldn't take care of her, and so she moved on, and she's probably dead. She didn't seem like she wanted to stick around.
Yeah.
Which is sad, and, like, but it's one of those sads because, like, we had literally, like, a couple scenes with her mom and her dad that, like, it's sad, but in that, like, anime where we were like, it's sad for you. It's not sad for me as the audience.
No.
I don't care.
We don't care.
I don't care about any of these people. But it's sad for you.
Yeah.
Oh, poor you.
Gives a little bit to her character.
And it also kind of helps you understand why she's not just a police officer. Her dad was such a hard-working police officer that she wanted to, like, keep going and, like, be the best.
Exactly.
Thus, she's an engineer hunter.
Yeah. And so, I think this cut was the most jarring for your husband.
Yes, it was.
Because it immediately cuts to a bright pink dildo.
Yes.
Vibrator. It's a vibrator because it's moving and making noise.
Sure.
Yes. So it cuts to this thing wiggling on a bed.
A very uncomfortable wiggling.
And also a young woman who is being forced into S&M work with a very hairless, chubby man.
Very shiny man.
Very shiny. He is slick with
He
sweat.
is very slick.
And her pimp comes in and
is telling him that, like, he's over on his time. It's time he has to pay extra because he went over.
Yeah.
And at this point, the girl just kind of is like, all right, peace out, bye.
Yep.
Takes all her stuff and leaves.
Puts on the panties outside of the bed, outside of the hotel room.
Because, why not?
Yeah. And next we see that the pimp is getting a call. She's walking down the street, and as she enters a public bathroom, someone walks up on her, and she's trying to pimp out that chick again.
Yes.
And proceeds to be killed. Has a cylinder of some kind shoved down her throat, and blood starts pouring into it.
Yes. Is very strange.
Mm-hmm. And right after this, we cut to another commercial.
A much happier question.
No, not at all. It is the anti-suicide one.
Oh, it is the anti-suicide.
Where the dude cuts his guts open and then the intestines start, like, moving out like spaghetti and shit.
But it's like, all of this sounds terrible, but visually it's done in such a way that's so over the top and, like, arguably not realistic.
It's fun.
That it's like, almost dumb.
And this is the first part of Brian of, like, what the fuck is going on? Why are the body moving like that?
It just is.
Yes.
And this, I think Tokyo Gore Police, part of the reason why this is a good, like, intro is because, like, it starts off with, like, plenty of opportunities for you to be like, what is that? Why is that? And you can logic them if you spend enough time.
Yeah.
But you don't need to. And then you get to the middle part. This part is kind of the beginning of that, where if you wanted to, you could break all of this down and have some sort of logic, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be reaching for it, just like my elementary school literature teacher with all of the books we ever read. But you could do it, but there's no reason to. There's no point to. You're here for the ride.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. I like this commercial.
It is a good commercial.
And so, we're back to the bathroom,
Yes.
and the pimp has been, cut up into nice pieces, and stuffed into a cardboard box with all her blood in a ring around her.
It is very artistic, but also, like, that's not...
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Like, the box is visually too small to hold all of her.
Yeah. And, what is the police's,
response?
Yeah, their, plan of action?
Yeah, what do they plan to do about this horrible killing?
They're gonna send Ruka out as a decoy. Cut to over-the-top changing scene.
Yeah.
Like, not really over the top, just, like, real quick.
It is, but at the same time, it's done in such a flair that you're like, was that necessary, guys?
Yeah.
But it was, because that's this movie.
And it's a stupid costume, too.
It is a stupid costume.
Yeah, it's so bad.
Yeah.
She got no ass.
She has zero butt.
Yeah.
Like, the costume, good design, a lot of fun. Not sure where it's all going, but it's there. But man, it was...
Yeah.
is a lot of butt shot for not a lot of butt.
Yes. And after this, we cut to another commercial about being fashionable to cut your wrist with a new wrist cutting tool.
Which
the blood will be tastier.
It's that level of, like, nonsense where it's like,
it doesn't hurt as much.
Look how cute it is.
Yes.
Like, it's that level of nonsense where you're like, this is so far out of reality that, like, it's reached the point of ridiculousness.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I think this commercial is specifically this one and the one where the police play soccer with the kids.
Yes.
Those two, I think, are, like, really good explanations of, like, what the over-the-topness that you need to be able to just, like, let it go.
They're like, this is fine.
This is just how the world is.
Yeah. And so, Ruka is on a cramp train. There's an edgy teen eating pupa and insects.
He's being weird, edgy kid.
And while she's trying to find the head engineer, some dude gropes her butt.
Ah, rude.
And what does she decide to do?
Well, like any logical person.
Takes him off and cuts his arms off.
You know, like one does.
And walks away in a very Lady Snowblood style with the paper umbrella over her shoulder.
Very Lady Snowblood style.
Which, if that's what engineer hunters can do, I don't blame people for fearing them.
But yeah,
because she was just judge, jury, executioner of a
guy who, in his defense, just touched her butt.
He groped it.
He groped a butt, but like, does that mean you lose both your arms?
Some places, yes.
In this world, it does.
Yes. And so we cut back to Ruka on a now empty train, and as she's dozing off, she dreams of her father's execution. And
it's up until the very end of this movie, she spends so much time being focused on her dad's death that you're like, girl, get over it. Oh my gosh, he got 2 lines, like, come on. And then the end will show up and you'll be like, oh, that's why we're replaying this. It's meant for you to play detective a little bit with this movie, which is a little different than I think a lot of Japanese body horror, where you're usually just supposed to sit back and enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
This one does invite you to try and, like, puzzle together a whodunit a little bit, but also, like, just like Agatha Christie novels, there's not enough for you to actually figure any of this out. Like, once you've watched the movie, there's enough for you to be like, oh, yeah, he is in that scene. Oh, okay, yeah. But, like, you are not going to get it.
Nah, not at all.
But it's kind of fun that there's, like, something to actually think about, like, plot-wise with this one. I'm more used to the ones where it's like, what is plot? Who needs plot? There's a tiny plot. It's a very small plot.
It's fashionable enough.
Yes, exactly.
And so while she's dozing and waking up, creepy man shows up in front of her.
Very creepy man.
And as he gets off, she begins to follow, and there's another box with body parts.
Another box! Another box that is too small to hold all those body parts.
Exactly. And as she chases him through the alleyways, the fight begins.
And this is I like the fight choreography from this one because it almost feels like an over-the-top kung fu movie, but also it's so distinct in its style and its reliance on, like, the over-the-top weapons and body bits.
Yeah.
That, like, it's almost its own version of a kung fu in a way.
I'd say it's more samurai film-like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The reason I say kung fu is occasionally, especially later on, we do get a good deal of flipping. Which to me always feels more kung fu than samurai. Just because most of the samurai classics that I watched, everyone is very much on the ground or dead. Yeah,
right away. And this one, so this scene actually comes from the original.
Yeah.
And while they're fighting, she slices his forehead.
Yes.
And oh boy, Brian was not too thrilled with this scene.
No, this is another what?
The head engineer begins to scalp himself.
Yes. In a
from the below the eyes up.
Yes, because why not?
And now he is an exposed brain with eye cannons.
Yes. And when we say eye cannons, snail-like eye cannons.
Yes.
They are so gross. And also, there is no way this actor can see worth a shit.
So much blood.
There's so much blood. There's so much, like, prosthetics on this actor. Like, the amount of glue used.
I want to imagine that he can see just through, like, the tubes. Like, that's how he's looking around at everything.
And, like, the character design is, like, one that's very interesting to look at because not a lot of people I think would pick a design character like this because yes, it's scary and you can kind of logic your way through like, well, he's the mastermind and all this sort of stuff, but also these eyeballs are not practical for turning around. He is going to blind himself multiple times a day just from like turning around too fast in a room.
Yeah. And so this is where he gets the power over her is he shoots projectiles that pin her to a wall.
His own hands.
No, that's not no. That's later on.
That is later on.
They're just like little seed pods or something.
Little fleshy bits.
Yeah. And what he does is he sees potential in her or whatever.
I don't know. This guy's a snail weirdo.
Yeah.
He's Mojo with snail eyes. Like,
yeah, you're not wrong. Proceeds to draw a line down her arm, and her arm just opens up, and it's dope. And he opens up the arm with the key tumor,
yeah,
and then puts the key tumor in the arm, which is interesting because that's also from the original movie. And in the original movie, it was more of like a seed.
Yeah.
Rather than a key.
And honestly, this part of the movie, like, from an artsy sort of standpoint, like, is kind of cool. Like, there's a lot of visual symbolism going on here. And then we go right back in with fighting and blood, which is nice. Because it's a nice little break of, like, all right, these character designs are over the top, these weapons are over the top, these action moves way over the top.
Oh, yeah.
And then this part is, like, a nice little, like, psh. Yes, it's gory, yes, it's bloody, but it's artsy.
Yep. And as Ruka passes out, we cut to another advertisement of the sharp sword.
The sharp sword. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's an advertisement just like all the others.
Yep. And so Ruka wakes up at the hospital with the chief of police watching over her.
Adoptive dad boss.
Yes.
I don't think we mentioned this. Has a megaphone permanently attached in front of his mouth.
Yes, I was going to mention that because that's the first time Brian had a question about it.
Is permanently attached, so this man is constantly, like, megaphone style screaming at people, no matter what.
Yeah. And we go back to Ruka asleep at the bar as the owner watches over her. Find out a little bit more that the owner, Ruka, was, like, being bullied or something.
I don't know.
And
they're childhood friends because trauma.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And then we get the stupidest
Yes.
facial recognition
Yes.
tech software. It's not like it's very much, it makes me think of, instead of like how CSI.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the show.
Yes,
had
it is
the
a show.
face that just like randomly rotated through the program.
Yeah.
It made me think of the end of Super Mario World 3, where like you have to line up.
Oh yeah.
the shapes
And try and make the face. Yeah.
And that's how they make the face with just the top half of the head.
Yeah, they're just spinning cubes around, hoping that one of them makes sense.
Yep, where Ruka gets where she needs to go. She's going to the man's old laboratory.
Find out more about him.
As the chief of police gets pissed off and trains.
Yes.
Stupidly.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Also, now we cut to another commercial.
More commercials!
Wii Sports Execution.
Yes, it is. That is exactly what it is.
Yes. I'm pretty sure it's a Wii remote that they just, like, tried really hard to cover up.
It's meant very much to not look like one, but yeah, it's very vibey.
Yep. And Ruka gets to the building.
Mm-hmm.
She finds a list of employees, so to say.
Dun dun dun.
And now she knows where she's going again.
We gotta go catch him.
This movie is very fast-paced and all over the place for the hour and 40-some minutes it runs.
Yes. Yes, it is.
But also we're cut to a cop who wishes he had drugs. He's on break or something and
just wants drugs, because that's the world we're
draws a needle on his arm and
pretends.
And so from this, cut to another commercial. This is your favorite one.
This is my favorite one.
There is a weeb otaku guy who is yelling some shit about, like, he doesn't want kids to end up like him, so he's gonna kill the kids before it happens. He kills, like, 2 of them.
Yeah,
and then
like, these kids are just standing in the grass playing soccer.
And then the police come and kill
like, mow this man down in front of the children. Just annihilate him.
Then proceed to play soccer with his head.
With the children, because, they're friends.
Because why not? Phones don't hurt.
Because the police are there for your safety.
Yes. They're friendly.
They're friendly. Look how well they get along with children.
Friendly neighborhood policemen.
Yes.
Yeah. And so now we're at that drug cop walking down the street.
Yep.
Presumably up to no good.
We
know he's up to no good.
Yes.
And so he shows up at a engineer fetish club.
Yes.
Which
that's what you do, apparently.
Is interesting because at this point, up until then, we've been kind of explained that the engineers are berserkers.
Yes.
Like, they have no control. But this
kind of implies that, like, maybe there's just some of them who go on a crazy, and then there's some who just live in this weird underground ring.
Yeah, it makes me think of back in the 90s when they were blaming violence on video games.
Oh.
Where it wasn't necessarily like they made the two correlations. Oh, this person played video games. It must have led him to do it. Where in actuality, it was more so the people who were already prone to being violent people use that as a way to live out their desires until it became too real. So it makes me think of that a little bit.
Yeah. There's also always the logic of this movie of like, meh. So that's always a possibility as well.
Yeah.
You know.
And so at this point, quick little side note, the brothel was actually inspired by Nishimura while he was at a go-go bar in Thailand.
It has a go-go bar feel.
Yeah. And we are introduced to the lovely ladies.
Yes, all three of them.
We're introduced to a girl who has a tengu nose and an eyeball in her mouth.
Yep.
We're introduced to
Kinda gross.
Snail Girl.
She is straight up a snail.
And her nipples are snail shells.
She's a snail.
Yeah.
And then we get
Alligator Girl.
Alligator Girl. She got alligator boobs.
Yes, and she is also the person that Ruka is looking for.
Yes.
And so while they're there, we see that there's perverts.
Of course.
Some dude is highly turned on by the snail chick.
And so this is apparently a go-go dance bar where you can just like...
It's a brothel.
Yeah, you can wave down someone and like steal the snail girl for a while. So someone also steals the alligator girl. I want that one with the weird boobs and no butt.
Yeah. It makes me think of a lower budget version of the S&M Club from Matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see it.
And so the cop is into alligator tits.
Yes.
Because he picks her, and after he leaves, they introduce the piece de resistance.
The best looking one of them all.
The human chair.
Yeah, she's just a human chair.
Where her vagina is straight up a painted plastic orchid.
Yes, it is all very stupid and over the top.
And she performs the opposite of the flat chick from Doctor Who.
Yes.
She moisturizes you.
It's one of those scenes where you just have to go, that was weird and gross. On with the show.
Golden showers for all.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it's
a weird scene that it's there.
Yeah.
It's just part of the movie.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird.
And so the cop goes back to the back room.
Yes.
And while he's there, she opens the door and is doing a very come here kind of thing.
Yeah.
He gets into the chair and she starts giving him the business.
You know, what he paid for.
Yeah, and as he's sitting there, the brain eyeball cannon engineer dude walks in and he starts to freak out and she bites his dick off.
Yes. Yes, she
and
does.
spits it across the room.
Rude.
And as he does that, he gets out a machine gun from God knows where.
We don't have any idea where this machine gun came from.
She jumps in the way of him killing the engineer, and he shoots her to the point where she's cut in half.
Yes, just takes her right off the bottom half.
Yes, and he tries to get away, and as he collapses outside the room, she comes back out creepily again.
This is the most like standard horror scene. This little teeny tiny part, because she comes crawling back out.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no, what's gonna happen?
Her eyes are all black.
That part's a little creepy. And then her lower half is turned into a crocodile mouth.
Alligator vagina.
And just legs in general too. Like the whole lower half of her is turned into an alligator mouth. To the point where she, like, butt scoots around and chomps on people.
Yes.
And so thus the horror factor just kind of flies out the window and you giggle at this lady butt scooting her way around to chomp on people with her legs.
Fun little tidbit. Her opening and clamping her mouth legs.
Yes.
That's the only GIF I could find for this movie on Facebook.
You don't say.
It's the only one.
I mean,
like,
it's not a good one.
No, it's not.
It's a terrible one, but okay.
And so they battle it out. She rips off one of his arm. She rips off his arm.
There's a lot of blood everywhere. At one point, she like stands on her weird nose legs and like chuckles around a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of biting and shooting.
And then as she's going in for the kill, he grabs his own arm and blows her away by pulling the tendon on his arm.
Because his arm was holding the gun. It's so stupid.
That's so fucking great.
It's so stupid. Especially because, like, as he was doing it, I can't remember who it was, but one of our friends was like, you still need 2 arms to do that because you have to hold the arm and pull the tendon. And he just kind of ignores that fact.
I'm pretty sure it was Brian.
Probably.
Because this is one of those movies where we keep having this tradition of telling a couple of our friends, come over later, and then they show up like too early.
They show up too early. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes no sense, but also, like, why not?
Yeah.
It's a dumb thing.
And from this, the head engineer guy comes over and is hinted that he turns him into it, but we soon find out that the druggie cop returns to the police station with dick cannon.
It's just straight up a dick cannon. Like, cannon that is where the dick should be.
With big fucking cojones.
Is unnecessary.
Yes.
But that's kind of the whole point of the show.
And it's an elephant trunk, too, because it also makes an elephant noise.
It makes elephant noises. Why? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
And he proceeds to start assaulting the police officers by shooting dick bullets.
Yeah.
I have other words, but I'm not going to use them. So now we are back to Ruka again after actually quite a bit without seeing her.
Yeah.
And she goes to a door that is covered in padlocks.
Because that's what you do.
Hella suspicious.
It's very suspicious.
And all the the locks just in a chain fall off.
Because that's really good security.
Totally. And the engineer opens the door and says he's been waiting.
Yes.
Come in.
And now we get the full backstory that no one cared about.
Yes. And boy, is it
it's a terrible
same time.
Terrible backstory.
So the way he's explaining it is kind of like picture book style.
Yeah, it's
where we learn Ruka wasn't the only victim. His dad was also there the day. His dad killed her dad.
And it's kind of filmed in that way where it's like, if you had just panned a little bit more to the right, you would have seen my dad dying. Dun dun dun.
Yep.
Like, it's literally that.
Yeah. And
like, both our dads died on the same day.
All because his dad was a sniper. He was the best sniper. He killed people from the top of buildings. He killed people from the top of Tokyo Tower. Once he supposedly killed someone by shooting from the top of Mount Fuji.
And like, it's like the bullet around the world sort of nonsense where you're like, sure dude, okay.
Yep. And we also get the whole backstory of that. He was the scientist who created the engineers. Mm-hmm. Because after his father was killed by the man who hired him to kill Ruka's dad.
Yeah, and guess who that man was?
They'll explain it in a minute. But I love how he becomes... how he creates the engineers.
So he's got in his lab all these vials of
serial killer DNA.
Yeah, but it's just like little vials of like liquid just kind of floating around. They're like, and they're all labeled too, so you can be like, oh, okay, just named off some, like, Googled top serial killers and slapped their names on some bottles.
He's just the serial killer version of Spider-Man.
And then he gets so enraged, he injects himself with all of them.
All the DNA.
And now he is the ultimate.
Well, he almost dies, and they pull a key-shaped tumor out of his head.
Yes.
That he then proceeds to duplicate.
Yes, because that's clearly what you do.
Yeah, because now he's going to take down the police force. Because we also find out that Ruka's dad was against the privatization of the police force, and that's why he was killed, because he was the leader of that, and now he's...
Yeah, so was there story to this movie? Yes, there was. But it's all in this 5-minute segment.
Yes, and we find out that Ruka's adoptive father / chief of police...
Boss.
...was the man who killed.
Yeah.
The man who killed her dad.
And also his dad. So he's the reason for everyone being upset and sad. And so, of course, in true anime logic, Ruka goes, well, now that I know that you're also sad and your dad also dead, I will no longer kill you. I must go kill that man over there.
Actually, no, she cuts him in half.
Yeah,
She's
she still kills him because good for her.
Yeah, slices him right down the middle, and it's just
but also, like, it's kind of...
It's such a comedic part for me, too, because he's like, oh, now you'll unite. We have a common enemy. And she's no, I don't care.
Still slices him in half. But it's done in such a way where it's, like, almost like everyone she meets who has wronged her even a little bit is killed or arms ripped off or something.
Yeah.
Like, no one gets away scot-free by touching this lady. But it's done in such a way where it's like, it's almost non-consequential.
Yeah.
Like, you don't care as the audience. She doesn't care. This is just like, yeah, okay, now on to the next part.
Oh, what was it? I just had a thought. I kind of want a movie now where Charles Manson becomes radioactive and bites someone.
That is the logic they used here.
That would be great. I have a side little goal that I want to learn that crazy, weird dance he does.
It's very strange.
Oh, it's interesting, but anywho, still one of the stupidest reveals ever of backstory.
But no, really.
And so the hunt for the engineers begins, where the police force is told they can kill anyone that they think is a little suspicious.
Even slightly suspicious. So the police force is now out on the streets, just mowing people down.
Yes.
Just left, right, center, just annihilating people.
The owner of Bar Independence, which, by the way, that is her character name too, is...
Yes, the owner of Bar Independent. You know, the only friend she had as a child.
Bar Independent owner.
Yes.
Yeah. She perfectly cuts a policeman's face off with a bottle.
Yes, like, she broke a bottle and then used it to, like, remove his face, Kung Pao style.
Yep. And they eventually take her out of the bar.
Yep.
And then we're cutting to a bunch of other people dying. The schoolgirl from earlier is back. She has a wrist or a box cutter blade.
Yep. She's just going to town.
That's her arm. And she's fighting the only other female officer we've seen.
Yes. Who
has, I don't know the weapon. It's like a traditional spear sword thing.
I learned the name of it, but I have since forgotten. Yeah, it's a stick with a blade on the end.
Yeah, and I always forget that this is in this movie, because this carries over to some of the other movies in the genre. Acid milk.
Oh yeah, I forgot about acid milk. That's a trope. We don't know how to explain it either. It just is.
It's just a feature.
It's just a feature. It's in a lot of them for some reason. I don't know. Yeah, just accept it.
Yeah.
It's here.
Yeah, and so as Ruka shows up to the blood and the gore, we see her best friend.
Her only friend in the world.
Ripped in 4 perfect pieces.
In the most dumb way ever. Like, they tired a bunch of cars, they're gonna rip her apart. And then it's just like perfect tear glistening down her face as she sees her friend. No, friend!
Yeah, but I do want to say, I think her manifestation is the most interesting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because she's the only engineer we've seen that is internally wounded.
Yes.
And that's what causes the transformation.
Yeah, she's the only one who... And that's kind of the only rule we get kind of given hard-lined to us, is like, you have to be injured to get the weapon part. Otherwise, you could theoretically live your whole life perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's the only one who actively breaks that rule, and I think it works only for her because that rule is kept for everyone else. Yeah. Whereas all the other rules that were kind of implied, like, no one follows, so it's...
Well, it also makes her special.
It does make her special, and as we've already established, this is the tropiest of tropey movies, and so of course she needs to be special.
Yes.
She needs to be in charge of her weapon and her anger.
Yep. And so, after she kills the people who killed her friend...
Now everyone important in her life is dead.
Yeah, or almost dead.
Yeah, pretty much everybody.
We get to probably the most awkward and unfitting part of the movie.
Yeah.
There is random racism. Blatant racism.
It's just straight up and, like, it's there for no reason.
Yeah,
like,
not really.
There's not like, oh, this character was here before and we thought it was funny. No, they're just there.
There's blackface and a guy wearing a traditional Chinese hat saying, I like killing the Japanese.
It's just really strange. We don't know what to we don't know why it's here or what it's doing here.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's the only thing that I don't like about the movie is it's just...
Yeah, because the rest of it is over the top, but it's also tropes we see in other movies.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, this movie is not the first of its kind by any long stretch of the imagination. Like, these tropes were already there, and this movie kind of took them and played with them, not even really a lot of new ways. It just kind of tweaked things here and there. This part, though, this isn't a standard trope from any of these movies, as far as I know. And not to this extent. I mean...
well, unfortunately, in these kind of movies, there's a couple of them that take the blackface really far. Like, I think it's a Frankenstein girl versus vampire girl. There's a trio of them who want to be, like... They do the thing that American kids in high school when they're like, oh, I want to be Japanese, and it's like you're a white kid from Wisconsin, man.
Calm down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. We don't know what it's doing here, but thankfully it's over quickly.
Yeah, it's over real quick. She kills them, and now she is on to
the final battle.
Yes. And before that, she has to fight Igor.
Oh yeah, Igor.
With his
he's the stupidest fight.
Sever arm launcher.
Yeah, like, legitimately, like, think video game style giant gun.
Grenade launcher.
Like, but bigger than that, like...
It's attached to his arm. Like,
it is unnecessarily large, and he just has decapitated hands that he's placing in it and launching, and these hands, for some reason, he can control, kind of. Like, they open and close still.
Yeah, he punches her in the face, she gets knocked down.
It's so dumb.
He is about to kill her because as they're flying, they stick out their middle finger. And
so pointy.
Her creepy arm thing latches up onto rafters, and all the fingers slowly turn around it. They,
like, show this in slow motion multiple times, and each time they do it, it gets more and more stupid, and the logic makes less and less sense, and I think that's why it works as a scene. Like, it's so dumb it kind of hurts your head, but, like, it's also funny.
Yeah. And, because that's actually how she kills him, is the...
She uses his own weapon against him.
Yes. Because they turn around and impale him.
And hit him, yeah.
Yeah.
So Igor's dead.
And now we are on to kind of the final boss.
Yes.
We are up against Dog Girl, but she is equipped with katanas.
So on all four limbs, she's got katana blades, and she, like, beetle scurries her way around the thing. Logic is thrown out the window. Physics are gone. Gravity, what is it? She, like, spider-style sticks to walls and ceilings.
Yeah.
For no reason. And, like, so this is the part of the movie where you're like, oh, this character was there for somewhat of a reason.
Well, we also find out that...
she's kind of brainwashed.
She is brainwashed.
She's full-on brainwashed.
But she's also kind of Ruka's adopted sister.
It was almost
sister pet?
Yeah, sister pet, for sure. It's almost like the leader picked Ruka and was like, what if we left this one kind of normal and I made this one into a machine, and let's see which one is better.
It's Thanos' daughters.
Yeah, it is very similar to Thanos' daughters, only much grosser and weirder.
Yes.
So, like, this weird dog child, he's brainwashed her to the point where, like, he can flip a switch on her and, like, either turn her into a killing machine or his loving, weird pet child.
Yeah, because it doesn't at one point, like, he make her go down on him or something?
Yeah. This poor creature just needs to be put out of its misery. So he turns her into a killing machine, and this is the part of the movie where even our friend who likes dumb horror movies went, it's not that the idea of someone with blades for arms and legs isn't, like, a cool concept. It's just that she's the worst concept he could have picked because she's not very good. Like, it doesn't take our main character very long to take off her legs and arms minus the blades.
Sever the katanas. And then just...
like, completely... Like, she's now useless as a weapon.
Wrestling style spin her around into a desk to knock her out.
Like WWE style.
Yes.
Yeah. So... Clearly not the best weapon choice, but you know what? This is how it was.
Yep. And now we're on to the big bad chief of police.
Yes, microphone man himself.
Which, I love this fight.
This is a cool fight.
This is probably in this genre of body horror, this cone of body horror.
Sure.
It's still one of my top 10.
It's a pretty cool fight scene.
It's over real quick. She is very quick to cutting his legs off.
Yeah.
Which, at that point, it's like, okay, Monty Python night, fight's over.
Yeah.
He proceeds to inject adrenaline into his legs.
And then jetpack style his way around because of all the blood coming out of his legs.
Yes.
It's so dumb, guys. It's so dumb.
Gold. I love it. It's
pure nonsense, and it is hilarious.
Oh, yeah. It is. Again, there's a reason this movie stuck with me for so long.
There's a lot of nonsense.
And so, yeah, she kills him. And then the movie's over.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well,
we get a little bit of an epilogue. We cut to our final commercial.
The last one.
Repeat of the first one with them executing the criminal, but then it burns up and Ruka is there with Dog Girl, but Dog Girl is now equipped with submachine guns.
Bum, bum, bum.
Or just machine guns.
Machine guns.
Yeah. And that's how it ends, doesn't, because they say there's more, and
they kind of like do the thing where they tease like coming soon, and there's not a coming soon. There is no more.
Key-Man and Schoolgirl are still alive,
and it's kind of implied like she's helping put him back together so that he can make more, and that's going to be the second one, but there is no second one, so it's not really a thing. Yeah, so it's over. That was it, and you're just kind of left sitting on the couch going, "What did my eyeballs just see?"
Yes. I love this movie.
Fair.
It is so gory, so...
It's so over the top. It's so gory, but, like, honestly, it is exactly what it said it was going to be.
Oh, yeah. It knows exactly what it is. It's not trying to be anything different.
No. Like, you're not going to pick this movie up, look at the back, and be like, yeah, fun, family-friendly movie. No, you know exactly what you're getting into. And honestly, I appreciate it for its honesty, because this movie, despite having a couple of uncomfortable scenes... and a couple of spots where you just kind of go, but why? This movie's fun visually to watch. And, like, if you watch gore and, like, especially over the top American gore where it's, like, to the point of, like, this is dumb and stupid, this movie is fun to watch because it is very much in those lines and it has those sort of humor.
Yeah, and I think classic American body horror is more like a drippy blood.
Yeah, this is very spray.
Yeah,
it's very... like full-on fire hydrant level.
Yeah, it's cheesy kung fu movie.
Very much
levels. So. But yeah, I mean, besides that one scene, this movie is one of my favorites still.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunately still kind of harder to get because I think it's Media Blasters. They've become a shell of what they are. It's them or some other company that used to localize this stuff, which I was hoping to find more information on this movie. Unfortunately, the DVD I have is a bootleg.
Bummer.
Because it doesn't have the special features that it says it has. So, it's fine.
The look will keep continuing.
Yeah. No. I don't know. There's... outside of it just kind of being like a good introductory film, Tokyo Gore Police has honestly I don't feel as like great cultural or significance. Like,
it's not groundbreaking in any way, that's for sure. And it's not like taking any of these tropes and redefining them or molding them in some new and innovative way. It's exactly what it says it is.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's fine. Like, a lot of the times, some of our favorite movies are ones that aren't new or innovative. They're things that have already existed, and they just happen to do them really well.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
It is exactly what it is, though.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the great thing about it, because I am really appreciating these films that are coming out that they're not trying to be anything greater. They're trying to make one good movie and call it done. They're not trying to create so much. And even though this one hints at a sequel...
It does so, though, in sort of like it hints at a sequel, but kind of in the way that like other comedy movies have.
Yeah, like how Thanksgiving ends, where gobble gobble motherfucker, I'm back.
And like it knows perfectly well that there will not be a sequel. They're pretending like there will, because that's kind of the funny trope, especially in horror movies. It knows perfectly well that the standard thing to do is to make one and then make 8 more that have nothing to do with the first one. And this movie knows that, and it knows that trope, and it kind of went, yeah, no, but you wish.
Yes, exactly. I do wish. I kind of want another one, but I know it would ruin this one. It
would. But also the character designs, and the world that Tokyo Gore Police has, like, there is enough there that, like, if it wanted to become a series of some kind or a book, I do think it could be really successful, because the show definitely had it all well thought out. We know that because it was already thought out the first time he made it, and then he just kind of condensed it down for the movie. And so you get hints at this whole world, but nothing's truly resolved. Like, as when the movie ends, as far as we know, police are still a problem. I'm sure there's probably another division of this is probably not the only division of these hunters out there. The people still have the same problems that they always had. There will be another girl whose dad died in a horrible way, and now she's going to be head of police force. Like, this world works fine. And it's got its own weird rules and logic, but it sticks to those rules and logic just fine. Enough anyway for a series.
Yeah, and honestly, I've been thinking of, like, if it would or not, too, because Machine Girl just got a sequel last year, and it's finally coming to the US, I think, later this year or early next year, which I'm excited for. And I think a good chunk of the cast from this movie is in this one. So, like, it's kind of this weird little family of films that are all... everyone's had their hand in one or two of them.
Yeah, and so, like, if you do watch this movie and you like it, there are more out there very similar to it. And they are all, in some way, equally as bad and good all at the same time. Yeah,
there's some that go way extreme, and there's some that don't really go that far at all.
Yeah, you just read the back of the box, decide which one's right for you.
And
do some research.
Yeah, unlike me, who I go blindly into these kind of things, definitely do a little bit of digging on some of them, because I've watched some of these where it wasn't what I expected in a good way, and then there's others where I went into it and it's like, why did it go this direction?
Yeah, and I've definitely seen some from this genre where I do like them, and I think that they're hilarious and they're over the top. And there's others that have similar tropes to this with the body horror and the over-the-top blood and the over-the-top action, but they were missing some of the other scenes that I wasn't as big a fan of, or they're missing the plot that I honestly don't care about.
Yeah.
And so, but I've also seen others of these where, like, you know, I can get through it. There's parts of it that I do enjoy, but I probably wouldn't tell even my horror friends that I want them to see it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's kind of a pretty mixed bag in this genre, and I think Tokyo Gore Police sits kind of nicely in the middle.
Yeah, I would definitely say, and I guess this is how I'll conclude, is I do highly recommend watching this movie if you're into cheesy stuff. Like, if you're into Hobo with a Shotgun or any of the other splatter films, this is right up any of their viewing alley. As for family-wise or friends-wise...
Yeah, give it a watch first. Judge your own friend group.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I also recommend you watch this, especially if you are like me. You started off really loving the over-the-top campy and cheesy American gore movies. This one falls in line. There's a lot of similar tropes and humor there with, like, way too much blood and a man jetpacking himself around with his own decapitated legs.
Yes.
Like, those sort of scenes are definitely there, and they're hilarious. I do recommend giving it a watch if you like that sort of stuff. Maybe, though, it's maybe... Judge your friend group.
Exactly. And like we mentioned earlier, this is another one of those movies where we told a couple friends, hey, come over later because we're going to watch Scary Godmother.
After this one, and they were just a little bit too early. Thankfully not so early that, like, world was going to end if they saw anything, but, like, it was definitely like, guys, this man has decapitated his legs and is going to just jetpack around. Don't bother. It
was not a repeat of Gozu where they showed up, where the movie gets real fucking weird.
No, but yeah, this is one of those ones that for some people, this will be the introduction to a genre that you're really going to enjoy, and there are other movies like it out there that you're going to have a lot of fun with. This is not for everyone, though.
No, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So, anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, our second Halloween.
Get ready.
Nick Cage November, here we come.
Yes. The true holiday season.
Anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.